Welcome to City of Eureka Springs. This is a planning workshop. Today is Tuesday, April 9th. It is 5 o'clock. We're in the auditorium, and we are discussing bed and breakfast in residential zones here in Eureka Springs. So, Ann, do you want to start us out?
Well, actually, I would like Kyle to give a report on these postcards.
Yes.
Please.
So let me just, a couple things that I handed out to you. One is the news article from Fayetteville City Council votes to shut off illegal short-term utilities. I did have an inquiry into city attorney. He sent over this Arkansas Public Service Commission suspension of service document, and he feels that that is something that fits with state code and can be enforced by Jacob. So just a heads up on that.
And that can be, you said can be enforced, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the city council, we would have to take something to city council and say, this is a recommendation from planning that we do this in these types of situations.
So building code allows for it without city ordinance.
Okay.
Life and safety basically for operating unsafe. And so if they wanted to expand it, I feel like they could through ordinance. But for a couple of those specific things that we were looking at, the code enforcement already has the ability to.
So that would be based on, like, if somebody were operating an illegal, he could do that because they haven't been inspected, they don't have a certificate of occupancy, they've not gotten a CUP, or whatever the reason.
Right.
But that would be one of the reasons he could use this?
Yeah, specifically certificate of occupancy. No inspection, no fire inspection or anything like that. So,
Okay.
And no business license.
So I don't think for a business license that would be a form of enforcement, but we could definitely check into that. And if the state doesn't allow for that, the suspension of service.
I did notice that on the bottom of page 1 of the suspension of service, reasons for suspension, it says for using the service in a manner that violates federal, state, or local laws or regulations.
Which would be our residential laws.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that would
We
make
might need
sense to me.
clarification on that, but
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, I could definitely ask for some
Yeah,
clarification
that's
on that.
true, because in the book, it says what the approved uses are and whether or not you need a CUP for
Correct.
those. Yeah, so I guess that could,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll put an inquiry into force on that.
okay.
thank you for that. Okay.
And then on the other packet, I just made copies. The past couple of weeks, I've been receiving these postcards in the mail addressed to the Planning Commission, all saying no to B&Bs in residential districts, and then signed and
So we
they
don't
put their
know-
address on.
So we don't know who initiated that.
We don't know who initiated that.
Ah, okay.
I had a suspicion of one person, but when I asked, they said it was not them. So I'm, still looking for that person.
I mean, it's a wonderful way to communicate.
It is.
Yes, and I have on the agenda to read these into public record. I feel would be an appropriate place to do that.
So how many did you get?
19 so far.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So do you think that in the next couple of days, I could get a list of all the current B&Bs that have licenses in our 1, 2, and 3?
Yes. I've been working with Ida on that. I think, she's finalized that list. And
Okay. Because I've been doing some research, and some are coming up that they're not offering any breakfast whatsoever. There is absolutely zero mention of it. It just says you have your own keyless entry, and there's a mini fridge.
I have mini fridges too, but.
Yes, you offer breakfast. To me,
Yeah,
there's
I know.
a big difference there. So it's,
I actually did get some feedback from some neighbors close to where we are, and the bulk of them are, they're concerned. They're saying exactly what's on these postcards, and that is, they don't mind that the business is there. They just want somebody living there that is there on a full-time basis and that is following the rules of the CUP that they were issued. I think it still goes back to, I think we've got a couple points. Number one, are they serving breakfast? Aren't they serving breakfast? And then the other is it a manager? Is it an owner? And who's living there? Those always seem to be the two items that we
struggle with.
we talk about over and over and over and over again. So if you were to take all of that, to me, it sounds like if I were making the decision, I would say it has to be owner occupied. And we have the ability to do that going forward. The issue is that we have properties out there right now who have been issued CUPs that maybe aren't necessarily following the rules like they should be. And how do you handle those?
Yeah, the question is the enforcement. How do you deal with that? And I don't honestly have the answer to that.
I think, in some ways, and again, I have a property. I feel like I follow the rules. I do what was asked of me when I received the CUP. But it has to be easy. Well, I don't want to say it has to be easy enough on the city, but we all know that there are individuals that probably have way more work than they can handle right now. And we say it's enforcement, but how can we find a happy middle ground that is enforceable? Because, for at least 10 years that I've lived here, we've talked about the exact same things.
I think one of the things that we should look at doing, bed and breakfasts are listed 2 or 3 times in our code book, but it all seems to say something a little different.
Yeah.
I think that no matter where it is, it should mirror wherever it is. I think part of what we might have to do is in the ordinance, if you do not serve breakfast, you can lose your CUP or your grandfather.
But the only way to check that then is to go to a website and see where they're advertising. And some of those can be masked on Airbnb, where you don't necessarily know who they are.
That is true. The ones
Right.
that we do know, when they put their rooms on there, there's absolutely no mention of bed and breakfast whatsoever. That should be, and no matter what social media site you use, you need to let people know that you're a bed and breakfast, and whatever that meal is that you want to serve is included in the price of the room. Now, I do know there are some that do packages. There are some that have liquor licenses. I don't mind if they offer a different package for people if they want to do that, but the basic thing is they have to serve some type of breakfast to be included in the room.
Okay, so how would you propose, and I'm not trying to be,
No, I know.
I'm just saying how,
It has to be on their websites. Otherwise,
Okay.
how would we monitor it?
It may be that, that's one thing I'm wondering about is as we go, I know, Jacob talked about, this checklist, but I'm wondering if in the code, is there a thing where it says that your business will be reviewed once every 5 years, or is there anything like that that says that, bed and breakfast? So maybe that's what we need to do is put something in there that says your bed and breakfast will be reviewed at least once every so many years by the code to ensure that your compliance with ordinance so-and-so.
but that,
It would be like an inspection?
well, I know that the fire department is supposed to.
Right, now they
fire
did,
chiefs-
they do this fire
Right,
inspection.
and that
I mean,
doesn't happen every year.
No, it doesn't
either.
happen every year, but I mean,
Right.
there's something, so maybe a coordinated effort where at the same time, the city goes out there and says, here's our checklist, and it goes over it with the owner, right? The owner, and then the owner has to sign that, agreeing that he is doing all those things that are saying on the checklist. And if we find out they don't, then we have a premise to, he, entered into a fraudulent agreement.
Okay, so let me ask you another question then. When you say that they're not mentioning that they live on property or that they serve breakfast on their website, not everybody uses a website.
Pardon
So
me?
Not everybody has a website, so how are you going to handle those?
Well, if they don't have a website, then they have their own website.
No, if they don't have, if they choose not to have their own website, then they may use CAPC's page that's allowed to a person or a business paying CAPC taxes, or they may just use the Airbnb platform. And they wouldn't have a website to go to. They would just list their property there.
Maybe when they come in to get their annual license, on that application, they have to list the websites that they utilize.
Okay, because they could also use just the chamber's
Right,
Jackrabbit.
they would have to
thing.
list where they advertise.
Okay, I'm just
I mean,
saying
it's
that
just an
that's,
idea.
just FYI,
Yeah.
some of them don't have websites. Like we have one that's our own and we own it and update it and keep it, with all the information on it, but some don't.
Well, now, last year when we were doing the audit, I didn't find anybody that didn't have some kind of website. I also know that Vacasa had come into town, and now Vacasa has, which was once huge, is now gone really low, and there's another property management company.
I think there's several in town now, right?
There's several. So I think that that's a reasonable thing for them to put on their application. And it would make it easier for us when we do spot checks or whatever to see if that's happening.
Okay, so do you think that if they are using a management company, they should list that as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Because
Because the management company's not supposed to be managing the bed and breakfast.
in some ways they could, meaning they may come in and clean rooms only. Whereas the owner lives there and they serve the breakfast and they greet guests, or they are there available to guests if a guest needs something. So they could still have a management company that does that portion of it for them.
But they would still have to advertise that they serve breakfast on the website. That it is a bed and breakfast. Otherwise, it's just like it's a tourist lodge.
I know. I completely understand. If someone owns the property who does not, live locally, we had talked about, or I think it was you that mentioned something during our last workshop, that if they don't live within X number of miles of Eureka Springs or of the property, if we say from the address of the property, then what additional things would you require of that property owner? Because in essence, they're going to have a management company or they're going to have a manager on site.
But they have to have a manager on site. A management company cannot manage a bed and breakfast. Someone has to live there.
I completely understand. I'm just
so,
saying they'll have to.
I don't know that we could get by with 30 or 40 miles.
Well, 20
I'm
miles
trying
is
to think.
Rogers, right?
I know of, do we know how many we'll have to look, how many bed and breakfasts actually the owners do not live there, they have managers? I don't know the answer to that question.
We discussed the bed and breakfast thing several years ago, talking about, how many calories they had and whether they had a full meal or a sweet roll or whatever. At that time, the consensus was, well, if the people that stayed there, weren't happy, let the free market, they wouldn't come back or whatever. And we kind of dropped the thing about, how many calories or how many carbohydrates and all that they had. And they say if they, you know, they don't have a really good breakfast, then the people won't come back and stay and let the free market handle it. Now, that was the consensus several years back. I mean, I'm not saying that's good or bad, it's just that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that getting into telling people what they need to serve, I think that's going to get us into a...
Into the minutia, yeah.
It is, because when I research and look at other B&Bs all over the country, you know, I've seen them that we have local roasted coffee and a croissant. I've seen them have continental breakfast,
Right.
full breakfast. I think that's up to the consumer. If some people advertise that like there's one here in town, that they advertise they don't serve a hot breakfast because they encourage people to go to the restaurants, but they have oatmeal and snacks and things like that. That may be all some people want. I think that's adding a level of oversight that we don't need to do, just in my opinion.
I think there are still two things that we struggle with, and one is the breakfast. Whether or not they say they have a breakfast, or they don't have a breakfast, or they have, you know, whatever. What I hear you saying constantly is, I don't care what you serve for breakfast. If you want to do a cup of coffee and you want to do a piece of toast, and your guests are happy with doing a breakfast, then that's fine. But we still want you to advertise as a bed and breakfast. I think the most important thing, I think, for residents is whether or not it is owner occupied. I think if we were to change anything going forward, it would be that the criteria is they're owner occupied. And I mean, everybody runs their businesses differently. I'm sure there are great managers out there, and there are not so great managers out there. There are great owners out there, and there are not so great owners out there. But if we were to do anything in this workshop, what is the most important thing that is important to our neighborhoods? They live in a residential neighborhood, so in my opinion, why should they be treating it like a commercial business?
Right.
It is a commercial business, but they should also be part of that neighborhood.
Right.
They should live there.
True, but the thing is, if they're a bed and breakfast and they don't serve breakfast, now we have become a tourist lodging.
I completely understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that that seems to be the number one thing. Do they live there or don't they live there? We've had problems with managers and maybe not problems with other managers. But what we're basically saying is that breakfast doesn't matter, because you're saying it doesn't matter whether or not they have a instant pack of oatmeal.
Well, but what's the definition of a breakfast?
Yeah.
Again, I'm just saying.
Well, could
I know what you're saying, but you have to mandate that they do breakfast. I mean, the one that I'm looking at, the owner of the house lives there. There is no breakfast advertised, period. They don't even say they're a bed and breakfast.
I know that. But like Tom said, we've talked about this, and I'm not trying to come down at you. I'm really not.
No,
I'm just
I know
trying
that.
to just say what makes the most sense. What is the most important thing that people want in our neighborhoods? I see right here, no to B&Bs in residential districts. Is it no to B&Bs because they've turned into Airbnbs and there's so many tourist lodgings, or is it because nobody's physically there and responsible?
Could be both.
Right, could be both. So, we've talked about this quite a few times over the last 10 years. And, how do we this time make something stick?
Well, could we just require them, if they are a B&B, to advertise on the website that what they serve, whether it's a piece of toast or whether it's a full cooked meal, just if they advertise as B&B on the advertisement, they disclose what they do serve.
So have like full breakfast, continental, or
Yeah.
what would be the other accepted,
I don't know.
light? Light breakfast?
Yeah, light breakfast, something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they have
But no,
to
I think that's
disclose.
right. I go with Tom. I think, well,
You could
maybe we
define
need
what it is. I
to
mean,
add that to the licensing in that you need to define what that breakfast is. Is it, and during that licensing period, when they apply, they have to put it in writing, this is what we're doing. And then during that review process down the road, maybe to whatever we just, whatever they do, then they go in and they say, okay, you say here on your original application that you were doing the pancakes, and I don't see any pancake batter, what's the deal there? And, oh, we changed it. And said, well, then you got to reapply, you got to, change this form. You got to
you could
resubmit.
define what a continental breakfast is and what a full breakfast is, like, we define other things.
Yeah. To me, it's almost like so. The city, in my aspect, the city is giving them a license to participate in the economy in Eureka, and part of that economy is tourism, and part of that tourism is returning tourism. So if we don't put something in writing that says this is going to hopefully guarantee a good experience, then they're not participating in tourism anymore. They're participating in gouging the money out of the town.
Yeah, and it is a conditional use permit.
Right. That's right. On conditions.
Right.
We're putting the conditions right here.
Right.
You've got to serve, it could be a light breakfast, it could be a full, whatever. We can define that. That's easy to define. But it's got to be in that initial application period, and it needs to be in writing, I think. I mean, that's what I would say. That would take care of it. And if at the review process, we decide there's going to be a review process every 4 years or whatever,
Well, I
then they
think
go.
got to be showing that because these things change hands. I mean,
Yeah. So I mean, whenever, renewal, it has to be reaffirmed that that's what they're doing, and you can't just scratch that off and say no breakfast. It doesn't work because you're right. Then it changes to a tourist lodging.
Right.
And we don't. Matter of fact, in my neighborhood, and I know, my neighborhood's kind of touchy about they had 40 people here show up when they had that illegal bed and breakfast out there, and the reality is that
40 people?
Yep.
Oh yeah, the whole. I mean, it was almost the entire subdivision was here. It was great. It was awesome. They literally went door to door, put signs up in the whole neighborhood. It was a great organization. It was over in Pine Subdivisions, and it was great. But they came in here, and the lady who owns the bookstore in Berryville pretty much ran
Belinda.
it. Yeah, and she ran it, and it was awesome. But the thing that got me was, and I'm glad they did it. And I told them, I said, hey, Billy, that's the only way you get city council to listen to you is when you show up for the meetings and continue to show up, because you got to be a bird on their side to get them to do something. But the reality was, the safety was my biggest thing, because there was cars coming night and day through the neighborhood. And then you go down the street where this bed and breakfast wasn't supposed to be. There wasn't a license for one, and there'd be 20 cars, blocking the entire street. They were just everywhere. And it was like, who's managing this, And then the two ladies that had bought the property were living in another state, and I don't know, it was just crazy. It was crazy. But now it's been sold and not, but that's the thing. So it's got to take, it's kind of like the city needs to do this, but at the same time, without the neighbors and without these people that are writing these postcards involvement, it's not going to stay in a good environment. It's going to be in a bad environment. The bad environment is when not only are they bad tourists, but they're criminals. We have criminal gangs coming in, renting these places so they can rob people during the week. So that's what's happening in bigger cities right now. We've got cartels literally going in and bringing their gangs in and renting a local place in a neighborhood, and then robbing all the houses in the neighborhood. It sounds crazy, but that's what's happening. It's happening in Chicago and Detroit and all those large towns and stuff. We don't want it to happen in Eureka.
And the other question we have to ask is that, do we want to cap it? Do we want to, through attrition, as they're sold and they no longer are B&Bs, that slot goes away and we're not going to fill it again?
Okay, so is that, I know you said B&Bs, but is that a question that is also applicable to tourist lodging?
Well, there is no more tourist lodging, but you can transfer it.
Well,
But
that's what I'm
once you
saying.
sell it and it's a home, it's not going to be a tourist lodging again. So we would do the
Right.
same thing for the B&Bs.
Okay, so would you have two categories, or would you have them in the same thing because they're residential?
I'd have two categories.
Okay,
I definitely would keep them separate.
okay.
But, as we see up on 62 here in the upper loop, they're building houses left and right as fast as they can up there because they know that that's an easy run business up there. And that's really where it should be. I think in the commercial areas where they should be, and staying out of the neighborhoods because it's just, well, you got a quiet neighborhood and all of a sudden now it's not a quiet neighborhood. So it changes the dynamic greatly when you have people coming and going, and so yeah, I feel for those neighbors that have a huge diesel truck show up at 3:00 in the morning so they can move in and wake everybody up.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Okay, so breakfast, if we were to require them to disclose what kind of breakfast they were serving? I mean, this sounds like this is all on a form that they would have to fill out when they're doing their business license each year. Or, so,
It'd be a yearly thing because it's,
Yeah.
3 years is just too long.
Yeah, I think yearly.
Well, I think-
I don't know. I'm just trying.
I think on the business license too, don't they have to list who the manager is of it?
yeah, you have to list, with us, we have to sign it, but we also have to have a secondary contact. And for us, it's our son.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But it could be, a neighbor or whatever it could be, but technically, dependent upon whether or not the owner lives in state or out of state, there'd have to be more than one line on there, which would be a manager. It'd have to be a manager and then a secondary contact.
I am for, it has to be the owner living there.
Right.
Okay, so then what happens if, okay, so you're talking about any new ones that are issued?
Any transfers that would be made,
Okay.
they could not have a manager, it would have to be owner occupied.
Right. Yeah. Now, as far as the attrition, if we had, I think we had, I've had a lot of people approach me and say, well, I know that there's some that have stopped, operating. And is the city going to fill in those slots, And I think that is something we ought to look at it and think about. We want to keep and maintain a certain level of B&Bs, and we want to maintain a certain level of, but at the same time, we want to keep that wall up there so we don't go over that 31% of available housing. So
But
that's the key.
Think about how many B&Bs we have in the commercial district.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what
Do we have a lot
all
of
those
them?
buildings.
We've got quite a few.
But they're not subject to
They are subject to this.
the B&Bs in the commercial districts?
They are, if it's a definition of a bed and breakfast, and it's in our book, they are subject to all of this.
So how many were issued the B&B
I don't know the
license?
commercial, we'd have to ask Ida.
Yeah, I would have that list, Joe.
And in most of tourist lodging, it's being built rather than B&Bs in the commercial area. It's not.
I can't think of any B&Bs that are new builds.
Even in the commercial area, I don't think there's many B&Bs have been.
I mean, I know there's a couple B&Bs that are in commercial, even just on my street, down towards 62. There's a couple that are zoned commercial, and they're calling themselves a B&B. The question is that what did they opt to do that because they wanted to be a B&B, or is their commercial license just lodging? So, that would be the question, right? And at any point, I don't, because they don't have a conditional use permit, I don't think you could.
Can't get rid of them, can you?
Well, I don't think you could, I don't think there would, is there hey, today I decided I don't want to be called a, whatever B&B, I just want to be called an inn, but they're in commercial, so I don't know if those really apply to them.
If their license
If the license, yes.
says B&B, then they're a B&B.
If that's what license was issued to them.
Do you know that when I leave my house and drive down Elk Street, and I get down to the Red Bud, that's the 11th tourist lodging in that one little strip there.
You mean B&B or tourist lodging?
B&B or tourist
Lodging,
lodging?
just lodging in general. Yeah, there's a lot of them there.
There's a lot. Now, I do know that one strip is weird. It's commercial, on Summit, and then you go on to White Street. But that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that whole question about whether or not they've got a B&B license in a commercial zone, does it matter? Or were they subject to all the rules that a residential one? I mean,
We don't,
I don't
we
know.
don't differentiate in our code book when we tell what's permitted in C1, C2, or 3. If it says a bed and breakfast is permitted, it's permitted. They don't have to come
That's
to us,
true.
but they have to follow the
yeah,
definitions that are in
that
the
is
code
true.
book.
So that would be we always focus on residential, right? So,
Well, we are focused on residential right now.
right, but what I'm saying is, it would be interesting to know how many actually have a physical B&B license that are in commercial. So, because kind of going back to what Fergie said, it is false advertisement if your license is for a bed and breakfast, but you don't operate it as such. And maybe you've had that license for 20 years, and you've just over the years changed it, and nobody has said anything. So, okay, going back to breakfast, we kind of talked about breakfast. We talked about, owner occupied. If we were to issue a new one, and it's only owner occupied, new, what about transfers?
Transfers would have to be owner occupied.
Okay. So there would have to be a date effective as of when it changes in our code?
Yes. I mean, we're not saying that if they have a manager now and this ordinance would be passed, we're not saying, well, you can't have the manager. It's about when the property is transferred. Because
Yeah, it
that
would-
would kind of be, I mean, I don't think we could,
It would just be stated like everything else in code that says, as of
yes,
any new or transferred would have to be.
owner occupied.
Okay, and then what about marketing? So is that something that you would want to put in code as far as that they have to say this, they have to say that, and the application that is filled out on a yearly basis with business license is that they list out where they're listed and how they advertise?
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, that's part of that. They're getting a license to participate in the tourism, and we should be able to define them, how they participate in tourism, by saying certain requirements, okay? That it's got to be, it's got to state this, it's got to state that, and I just couldn't believe that a person would invest that kind of money building a B&B and not have any advertising. They have some. I mean, it just
Some don't.
boggles
I
the
mean-
mind, especially today with all the technology and stuff and all the way of getting your advertising out.
That's why VRBO and Airbnb are so great.
Right.
Because you don't have to have a website. You can just list on there, and it gets you out there, but it doesn't funnel you back to a website.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, it's a platform that they
Yeah,
can use,
right,
and they don't necessarily have to have a website. So, okay, so then the next question is, there does need to be some sort of repercussion if,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
if
I like
not, then
turning
we're,
off the utilities.
still in the same situation we've been in before, over the last 10 years, which is, how do we prove they are? How do we prove they aren't? And when they come in front of us, they say, oh, no, we are. I mean, we've all been there, right?
Well, I mean, we have to give that some thought. I mean, you
Well, there should be a
call them in.
penalty. I mean, if they put in a statement that they're doing this, and then we find out they're not doing that, that's the question I had. What is that penalty? Is that, I mean,
Is
'cause I
it
know, remember-
monetary? Is
I
it?
mean, yeah, is it $40? Is it, what is, I mean, is it fraud, or is it just
Which goes back to our original
Right.
discussion of,
Right,
we've been talking about this for a long time.
yeah.
And we can say all kinds of different things, but what are the penalties?
It's
if-
whatever we decide has to be an ordinance. It has
Right.
to be in black and
Right.
white. We can bring them in for a probable cause hearing. We can give them an opportunity to do a plan of action and fix it. I mean,
Okay.
there are options, but I think it should be very clear in the ordinance what the sanctions can be. It shouldn't be may, it should be shall.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to monetary, and I'm just throwing this stuff out there. If you go to a monetary, if I go to somebody's website and they're a B&B, that's what the license was issued as, and they are not listing that they're serving a breakfast. She used that one as an example. Then, in the past, or currently, what we do is we bring them in for a show cause.
Right.
If we wanted to really say, this is, we're serious about this, could a letter be issued if we had an ordinance that says, as soon as we recognize that you are not advertising as you should according to your license, there will be a daily fine of whatever until we can go check that website
Yeah.
and it says that it now has the correct information. I mean, because in reality, is a show cause a big deal, or is a monetary penalty more,
Well, I think
does it
that
have more teeth? Because
knowing that we could end up in court,
Right.
well, that's,
I think it's important to show that we've done everything to try to bring them into compliance. And I think a letter, and then if we find them, and then if it gets to the point that they do it again or whatever, to determine that we do show cause. But I think it's very important to try to do everything we can to bring, I mean, I know for some people it is their livelihood. I don't want to take that away. But I do think progressive discipline is the best way to go.
okay, so it sounds like maybe the opportunity is there for us to say there is a daily penalty. A letter goes out, if you're not in compliance within X number of days, there's a monetary penalty. If you have not corrected it, penalty will continue to accrue, continue, and then there's a show cause. I mean, there has to be a
Cut
a
off.
reason why somebody would be worried about a letter coming, right? Otherwise, they're not going to change it.
Well, I think let's just be optimistic and say we get it passed through city council.
I understand, I'm just
Then
saying
I
that.
think at that point, I do think that a letter should be sent to every one of them with the new ordinance, what it says, and what the penalty is. And we give them a date that if you are not doing this, you have to, and we can just make it general. We're not accusing anybody. This is what it's going to be.
We'll
And
have to do that anyway.
if they don't, then we can, and they don't do it, then you're going to get charged $500 a day till you do.
Okay.
Also revoke their license.
Kyle, you mentioned earlier that some of this doesn't have to be in code, in the city ordinance, because the building inspector can pull his code book out and say, you're not something called safety, health, or whatever. That to me caused a real problem, because that code book is about 400 pages long, and they can pull all kind of stuff out of that code book that he goes by. And, I just hate to have to rely on something in a code book when it's not in city ordinance. Because the people say, well, I didn't know I did that, and it's a bad situation.
Well, and the same thing on section F on, 4-26-16. It
What
says
page are you on?
That's what I said, 5 under rules and regs, 4-26-16. Yeah,
What
page
page are you
5.
on?
Yeah, on F there, it says, if no resolution of the allegations issued have been reached after 60 days, then the planning commission shall begin the process of revoking the conditional use permit as explained in Eureka Springs Code. So, that would be the final sort of shoe to drop, was, they have 60 days to say, here, you've got 60 days from the day we've noticed this wasn't happening to you coming before us and showing us that you are doing it or whatever. And if they don't, then we can revoke their conditional use permit. It's already in the code. So we could actually, put a license to operate. I mean that's already there. So that's already there.
What page is that on again?
Huh?
What page is
Oh,
that?
it's on page 5 of the
What's
rules
the-
and regs.
What's the page number at the
Oh,
bottom?
It's got 4-26-16.
Okay, so my pages are numbered.
Yeah, it's way in the front.
4, 6,
Yeah, it's way in the front.
okay, let me see.
I think that's the date it was done.
This one.
Yeah.
See, right?
Oh, this
Yeah.
looks different than
That's what I'm saying. yeah.
rules and regs?
Right.
I
We
think
need
we're
them all
going
in one
to
place.
books.
That's why I think Ida was talking us about turning in our books so we can get them all synchronized, because I think depending on which book you got.
Yeah, I don't even have that tab.
Oh, wow, okay, well then I've got it.
I've got it, yeah.
Do you? Got it,
Okay,
okay.
so, but yeah, so that's what I'm saying, is that might be you need to do that. But, yeah, so I was just saying that, and then also goes on, before that, it says, if allegations is found to have merit, then it goes on, but if allegations is found to not valid before, so they're all spelled out there, it says, we'll notify you in mail that, sorry, you are doing it, okay, but the same 60-day cycle for every one of them, so.
Okay, so do you, so this goes back to, again, there's information in our code book
Right.
that allows us to do this. So do you feel like we are too lenient? Do you feel like we aren't able to keep up with it? Do you think that there isn't enough information that we have to be able to track these people? Or do you think it's just an impossible?
No, I think it's possible. I think I think one of the things that we've got is, we've got I don't know what, there's a thing I used to call this, when you have new people in a key position, it takes a certain amount of time for them to acquiesce and get everything in order. And so, Kyle and Jacob are new, and it's been 2 years now, maybe a year?
Just over a year, yeah.
Okay, so just over a year. So now, hopefully, we're getting to a point where I think we can start leaning on them and say, okay, this situation, can you validate this for us per, codes F, and find out if there is a reasonable to believe that they're not doing it, and if they say yes, come back to us, and then we can call them in for a cause hearing, and then quote them that, and it says, okay, you've got 60 days from now to fix this, or we're going to pull your license.
Okay,
So that's the thing. So
but do you think that we don't have enough information in order to do that? So if somebody doesn't have a website, how do we
Right.
track them?
well, that's the thing. We
If-
got to. I mean, I think it's almost like we identify one, go through one, go identify another one, go through. But that's part of what we're going to lean on Kyle and Jacob to kind of help us. Which ones do you think, are the ones that, then we can,
But do you think
Pick up.
they have enough information?
well, that's what I'm saying, but that's what we're going to have to rely on them
Right.
to be the one, to be the content experts.
Well, don't
They're going to have to be the content experts. We're going to lean on them to be the
You're going to have
content
to get
experts.
closer to your mic.
It goes back again, can we put a lot of that in the application, so every
Right.
once a year,
That's true.
they reaffirm what they're doing?
And that's very true. And so now, like I said, maybe, May 1st, let's just pick it in the future, May 1st, that by May 1st, okay, we have this form adjusted, and basically then as those bed breakfasts have to renew their license, they have to fill out this new form. And then if there's a hole there, why aren't you doing breakfast, or what is that about? Then you could, but it would be during that licensing process. I think that'd be the best way to handle it, because if we did the other way, it would be like, oh, you're picking on me because, whatever, but if
Well,
it's
not if
just
it
a
was sent
logic.
out to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to pick on everyone.
No, I know, but I mean, if you send it out to everyone, there couldn't
Right.
be a, well, you've just singled me out.
Right, right.
You know,
that's what I'm
it's
saying.
just, this is what the new code is.
Yeah.
We all know that the code isn't going to get
Yeah,
updated tomorrow
yeah.
anyway, so.
Right. So, yeah, but yeah, so, that's what I would say. It's best thing to do is rely, we're going to have to rely on Kyle and Jacob to be the placeholders and to come up and say, okay, here's the situation with this one. We may need you to intervene as a planning commission and pull them in for cause. I mean, am I right? I mean,
I-
Well, if it's in the application, it's real simple.
oh, yeah,
If
no.
somebody makes a
yeah,
complaint,
Yeah.
then, Kyle or Jacob can
Right.
inquire and find out if the complaint's valid or not, and it's
Mhm.
the application that they signed it.
Yeah.
Rather than having to go around, well, maybe somebody's violating something, we don't really know, but we think they can be or whatever. If it's in the application, it's real simple.
So in the application, it says in there that they may be subject to a building inspector inspection,
Right.
and they are subject to a fire inspection.
And a records review. It should be a records review. That's what we're looking at is reviewing all their situation. Are they paying their taxes, right? Are they doing, so a records review would be that, in my opinion, that's what would be called a records review. Now I'm just throwing those words out there, but that's what I would
Do
call a
they
records
have,
review.
I can't remember, we have at the CAPC, there is an account number that is associated with each of the businesses that pay CAPC taxes, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so maybe on the application, they have to, because we've already talked about how, especially if someone were to renew their license the following year after they've gotten it, maybe they have to list it. I don't know what my number is, I don't do that, Tom does all that, but maybe that number should be listed on that renewal, that they have to physically list that number there. And then also agree to, this is the type breakfast I'm serving. I'm going to verify that, yes, I do advertise as and these are the sites I advertise on. I live on property, I have a manager on property, all of that is on that application, or application and/or renewal for licensing.
I think that would be the easiest thing to do, and then when we do go to, I don't know what we'll call it, audit or review, we just get a copy of what they filled out. And there's not that many, there can't be I know one is gone, should be gone. I'm thinking we might have 15 or 16.
B&Bs. Yeah, I would say you're pretty close. to that,
Somewhere
yeah.
in that area.
Yeah.
And then we have to find out on the commercial side which ones were issued B&B licenses,
Right.
correct? So, I think if that information is there, personally, I wouldn't have a problem filling this out. I'll say
And
I'm doing a
I'd
full
like to think that
breakfast.
the majority of them would not have a
Right.
problem.
I wouldn't have a problem with it. If it makes your job easier, I'm not trying to hide anything. That's the deal. I'm not trying to hide anything. If that makes your job easier and it's I know I'm subject to an annual review, whether that's looking on the website and seeing if I'm advertising correctly or whatever, I'm not going to have a problem with that. Because that's what my license is. That's what I agreed to do. Basically, I agreed to do that anyway when I came before the Planning Commission and got a license. And it is a conditional use permit, and we know that, if I make all my neighbors mad, they can come and complain, and I could lose my license anyway. So,
You can lose your license if you're a grandfather.
Right.
so, I personally wouldn't have a problem with this. I'm, trying to be neutral on this, but I wouldn't have a problem with answering all of those questions because I'm already doing them, so.
Okay.
I think the only ones you're going to have that it will become a hardship are those that don't necessarily want to do what their license says. I mean, some may be offended by that, but as I always say, being offended is a choice.
That's right. It's an
So-
attitude.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
you know,
So we got about 10 minutes before 6.
okay, so does that help? I mean, do you think that,
Oh, no, it helps a lot, and it'll help when we get with Ida. And
okay, so by the time we come to our next workshop, we
yeah,
could
I'll
kind of
have
have
drafts
a,
of things for us to, hopefully to the point that we would be able, after the workshop, to maybe vote in the meeting and
okay, do you
move
think,
forward.
do you think that all of this information, I know we've got to talk about, you know, suspension of service and all of that too. Do you think all of that we've talked about would be enough to put together within the next few months a draft that would go to city council? Because we've got our deadline coming up.
Oh, yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
You mentioned earlier about having B and Bs just in this part of the code and that part of the code, and that is it worthwhile trying to maybe while doing this to put it all, the B and B in one,
Would be awesome.
one,
But even the definition, when it talks about them, they're all different.
if we, you know, kind of clarify all that, is kind
Yeah.
of clean up the code, you know, how it's
And I
listed
think
in.
one thing we can do now, if I heard Ida right, that we were not able to do before, is that you can go in now and plug a word,
And, yeah,
and
Right.
no matter where it is in code, that is going to come up.
It
Where
does.
we did not have access to do that before.
Yeah,
Okay.
it really is amazing. That was-
Yeah.
that
Do
was
we
a
have
good-
access, like, where do we find that?
It's right on the city website.
Is
You
it
go
on there now?
Under code, when you go, you click on that, there's a link, but I guess it's, I don't know, at the top right. Anyway, you can put up the menu and click on code. I think
Okay,
it's called code. And then it gives you, right at the top, it says, you know, query, you know?
Okay.
But whatever word, and it, you get the whole screen. Now, it's hard, I wish I could, you know, do a report, but that, you get to a report.
okay,
You get all
do
the
you feel
information.
comfortable doing all of it, or do you need one of us to pull out all of the definitions that are in there or something that
Oh, no, I
help?
feel comfortable.
Okay. I mean, because it's a lot, I mean, it's quite a bit of stuff that,
Well, it is, but I mean, it needs to be simplified,
right. Well, it needs to be enforceable,
and it needs to be enforceable.
which means it has to be simplified, otherwise it won't be enforceable, which is where we've been. for
But
the
you
last-
can't have all these different definitions or explanations and think that we would go to court and look good.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying, you know, if it's simplified and we're sure that we can get every mention of B and B or definition or whatever out of the current code where we can clean it all up, then that would be fantastic.
Well, I think it's a matter of coming up with what we want in code, and then if we get it approved, then they just go in and it's all replaced.
It sounds like the bulk of it is going to be in the actual application or license renewal form. I mean, I know the definition needs to be clear, but it sounds like that form,
I think it also needs to be in the zoning part of R1, R2, R3.
do you think that's a simple definition that says
We know it's
any CUPs are subject to review?
Mhm.
I mean,
They
even
should
if it's
be.
something simple as that, and maybe it's a reference to, you know, application or whatever, but maybe that's the easiest way to do it, I don't know.
Well, I'll get something drafted up.
Okay. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that? You think we're making progress, or?
I think
do you
we're making progress, sure. I think we are.
And then Kyle, are you, you're going to put together a list of all of these? Because obviously this information will have to go with our recommendations to city council, just so that
Oh, yeah.
they know that we've held workshops and that we've gotten responses.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, I know a lot of them say no B and Bs, but is it a question of no B and Bs? Or is you know, I mean, because we have tourist lodging too, or is it that they're really upset that there isn't anyone managing them correctly?
Good question. Good question, yeah,
No.
So,
we don't know. just a postcard so far.
Yeah, so
But I think that's great that they actually sent postcards.
I know,
That's
it's great.
wonderful.
It's a good start. Kind of like putting up a balloon. All right.
Okay, so are we going to, we're going to adjourn our workshop,
Yep.
and then we've got about 5 minutes until our meeting starts.
Right. Yep, yep.